What are some examples of detours you'll face on your journey to the future? How does a reserves roadmap help? In this portion of the webinar, we'll guide you step by step through identifying true reserve expenses, those appropriate uses of your precious reserve funds. And how do you avoid expensive detours, reserve projects that end up costing far more than you budgeted? It's almost counterintuitive when we remind you that in most cases, it's best to not delay. So we'll give you a helpful guide and some examples of the 5 types of reserve expenses, all the way from inconsequential, where timeliness doesn't matter, to protection and catastrophic types of projects that need to be done on time. Your reserve study roadmap can help guide you when projects are more expensive than anticipated, or when you have a good opportunity to upgrade an asset when it's time to be replaced. And finally, your reserve study roadmap will help you know if you are on track to have enough reserves, if you know where to look. Well, now let's get to some examples so our audience can make good decisions all throughout the year. And let's start with one of the most common. Is it a reserve expense or an operating expense? Jim, why don't you address that question?
Yeah, we covered that question. We have an entire webinar on that, Reserve Studies 101, which you can find on our website, reservestudy.com, or on YouTube. But let me summarize that in the next few slides. Think about it like this. There's a 4-part test within those national standards that every reserve component must pass. Number 1, is it a common area responsibility, not individual owner? It's a common area association responsibility. Number 2, it has a limited useful life. Number 3, it has a predictable remaining life. And 4, it's above a minimum threshold cost of significance. Every component in your reserve study needs to pass this 4-part test. In the state that I live in, it's codified that reserve study providers must consider expenses 1% or more of your total annual operating expenses. But let's get back to the question that you face on a regular basis. How do you know if something is a reserve expense or an operating expense? First, look to your reserve study. If it's listed, it's a reserve expense, and funded for, it's a reserve expense.
Well, when you say the project, are you talking about the asset or the project? Or can you just spend a moment clarifying that?
Right. Let's just say, for example, if it's a roof replacement component in the study, just cleaning the gutters on the roof doesn't make that a reserve project. That's normal maintenance, best addressed in the operating budget. Or many times in the reserve study, you'll see a full paint job of the property, and then in the operating budget, maybe there's an annual touch-up or maintenance. So those are separate.
Got it.
Yeah. So next, consider if it's related to that component reaching its full remaining useful life. That means, for instance, a minor service call to a boiler is not a reserve project, but replacing the igniter system that may extend the boiler's remaining useful life by a number of years. That's a legitimate reserve expense. And then finally, if it truly looks like the component was missed and not included in the study, or wasn't knowable, maybe it was part of a hidden system, then check with your reserve study provider to help answer that question and prevent you from guessing. So that's a good example of exercising your duty of inquiry from the business judgment rule. These are dynamic documents that change every year from year to year, not only the costs and the timing, based on how things are wearing over time and new information. And so it's a constant moving target.
Yeah, nothing wrong with reaching out to your reserve study provider and asking for clarification.
Yeah, we're happy to help. That's what we're here for. So let's take a look at a simple, typical reserve component list. It's got a description, useful life, that's UL, RUL, remaining useful life, and current cost. So let's suppose your pool heater fails. You see in this list a pool resurface component, but no pool heater component. So from what you just learned, replacing the pool heater isn't automatically a reserve expense just because it's related to the pool. Check with your reserve study provider. There may be a reason it was excluded, or they may support the expenditure from reserves and add it to your component list in the next update. It's in your best interest not to guess. Too many properties gradually deplete their reserves by spending it on non-reserves projects.
Okay, great. That helps properties not deplete their reserves. You talked about losing money by spending it inappropriately. Now, is there something that managers and boards can do to help their properties actually save money, get prepared for the future?
Yeah, I think understanding and guiding towards the best value for reserved dollars spent is very, very important. Again, these are inevitable projects, and there is a sweet spot of value. When the remaining useful life is nearing zero, it's time to prepare or engage a professional to help you prepare a scope of work, bid documents, and help analyze those and make a decision for that best value. And the answer is often not the lowest bidder. Approaching reserve spending this way effectively avoids much more expensive deferred maintenance related costs, but not all reserve projects are the same. So let's talk about this. Projects fail differently and can be prioritized differently. Some are okay to defer, some you really should do on schedule and proactively. And we suggest you further categorize your projects like you see on screen. Are the components we're looking at okay to defer as inconsequential? When cash is tight, you can stop and perhaps not spend reserves if you choose and let that asset fail. You can live without it for a little while. Maybe it's discretionary. But we want to think twice about these projects that are labeled here reevaluate and obsolescence projects, doing the ones that have true merit for the association and ignoring the rest for now. And then it's the protection and catastrophic projects that you want to make sure to do on time. Any projects that are potential life safety issues and or protecting the building envelope, don't delay those. Those are the ones that'll get real expensive or cause hardships if you delay. The green categories here mean go, get them done. But just as a reminder, anything you defer it doesn't really save the association any money. These projects are still going to need to be done. And you have to be careful deferring only the safe projects, because otherwise you'll just cost the owners a bunch of extra money. Contact again your reserve study provider if you have a question about this.
Sounds like that's a recurring theme here today.
Yeah. So let's move on and show you a photo of a classic example of a poor decision. Here's a protection project that a board delayed doing their protective asphalt seal coat and repair cycle. Looks to me like they waited quite a while, and as a consequence, the underlying structural pavement has failed. So now replacing that costs 10 to 20 times the cost of that seal project. So again, we got to find that sweet spot of value and maintain as you need. The same is true for painting ironwork. Here, clearly, too late for a paint job to take care of it. Or replacing a roof. It's a bad idea to delay these protection or catastrophic projects unless you have an expert that's been engaged and is advised that it's okay. Everybody with me on this, understanding that reserve projects are different? Give me a hands raised if you understand that some may be okay to delay and some should be done in a timely manner.
What's a good example of an inconsequential? We're talking about maybe something like the water heater out in the rec room or something like that.
Sure. New carpet in the rec room, a water heater. Those would be inconsequential projects, I would think.
Okay. Thank you, everyone.
Very good. Thanks for being there with us.
Okay. Well, that's actually a real significant learning point there, to understand that reserve projects are different, and you can prioritize them to inconsequential all the way to the significant ones. But now that you know there's 5 types of failures, what about when the project matches but the cost doesn't? What is a board or a manager supposed to do in that situation?
Well, assuming you've diligently planned and given this kind of prioritization that we just talked about, make sure you go ahead and do the project. Expect that those extra dollars will either come from other reserve projects or be redistributed to other projects. The asterisk here is to let you know this all happens automatically when you use the cash flow method, and Robert will talk about that later. Then make sure your reserve study is updated with this new information, making your reserve study better each time and tracking actual decisions and as well as costs and other economic factors. So don't spend a lot of time worrying about it. Spend the reserves as you need them to get the projects done, particularly those that protect the property. Remember the 4 reserve rules. delayed projects often get expensive, and that just makes things expensive for the homeowners.
Okay, well, when you get to a decision point where you need to replace something, is it ever okay to upgrade a component, or are you forced to replace like with like?
Yeah, you shouldn't be spending reserves adding new assets to the association where one previously didn't exist. That's the key. But if the asset needs to be replaced, sure, it's totally fine to do an upgrade that's brings added value, is consistent with the technology of today. And again, it's you don't want to be adding new assets, but that's the cut point. So remember, if the asset or project exists, is the key distinction. Remember that reserves are there to offset ongoing deterioration of existing assets. So it's not a slush fund to be used to buy new things for the association. Give me a hands raised if this is a clear point.
You got them. Okay, Jim,
Yeah,
everyone's
good.
tracking you. Thank you all, hands down.
Good, thank you. So if your boards ever have a question on this issue, we can point you to references in National Reserve Study standards that cover this point.
Fantastic. Okay, well, let's talk about actual money in reserves. And the big question, do we have enough? Is ours big enough to do what we want to do? So just like with components, we devote an entire webinar to this issue. We call it Reserve Studies 102. It's all about the calculations. And you can, again, find that on our website or on YouTube.
Yeah, good. And the major point from that webinar is to measure reserve fund size and strength by percent funded, not the cash balance. It's all relative. We spoke earlier about Champlain Towers South in Florida, and they had about $700,000 in the reserve fund. And that sounds like a lot of money till you understand the magnitude of the types of repairs that they were facing. And they were only about 7% funded. So remember that cost of deterioration is ongoing. Percent funded will reveal if the result of those contributions, the resulting reserve balance, have kept pace with ongoing deterioration over the years. Next, we're going to show you a chart that shows you why percent funded matters. Because you can predict them, most special assessments coming. You can see them coming years in advance when you track and look at this percent funded. Special assessments are common when the association is in the 0 to 30% red zone on the left, but they're rare in most of the yellow zone and very rare in the green zone. So pretty powerful information to know. And this is great information for boards and owners. So give me a hands raised if you can see how percent funded reveals if an association is prepared or unprepared for their upcoming expenses.
Got it, Jim. They're tracking very nicely.
Perfect.
Okay, thank you all. Hands down. But I imagine everyone here with us is thinking, well, what's it actually take to adequately fund reserves and offset ongoing deterioration? Isn't that going to be just a fortune? And the answer is often it's about 25% of total budget, kind of like we show on this pie chart.
Yeah, and the question, why budgeted contributions instead of special assessments? Well, with budgeted contributions, every owner pays their fair share of this steady, ongoing deterioration over the time that they owned a home in the association. So the result is that the funds exist when they're needed. Having the funds on hand eliminates this costly deferred maintenance. And remember, the future takes care of itself when you take care of proper contributions on an ongoing basis. Everyone paying their fair share. This is the magic of how you avoid unfair special assessments and these expensive deferred maintenance projects and maximize the unit values.
Yeah, the big ticket benefits.
Right. So this is all part of your roadmap to success. Choosing your words and discussion points carefully is how curb appeal and property values are maximized. That's a successful strategy. You're probably distracted thinking, some of you, that your associations aren't close to putting 25% of your total budget aside, and you're wondering if that's even possible. But I'll tell you that contributions are not too expensive. Even 25% of total budget works out to about the cost of a premium cup of coffee per day. That's very affordable. And another fact is that budgeted contributions are the least expensive way to pay for reserve expenses. The expenses are what they are. The only choice you have is how the owners will pay. With budgeted contributions let's get to the next slide, please, Robert. With budgeted contributions, as you'll see on this slide, is an example of a $50,000 roof project. Owner contributions factoring some compounded interest over the years you're reserving for that roof wind up costing less than that $250,000. And if you have to do a special assessment, then that's $250,000 on demand, plus the additional administrative costs and headaches and other things that come with a special assessment. But at the current rates, it'll take about $320,000 from the owners to pay back a $250,000 loan. So like we've said plenty of times before in this webinar, delaying usually gets more expensive.
So actually what I hear you saying is the board members who have the courage to increase homeowner assessments to the amount that the reserves are being offset, that's actually the way they save the owners the most money, because that way you're getting compound interest from the bank and not the opposite, where you're paying interest to the bank with the loan. I get how that makes sense, but that requires courage, and that requires a communication set of skills. So let me ask you now, can you offer some help for managers of associations and board members where they need to have the courage and where they need to look for some strategies? How do we increase our reserve contributions? How do we increase them enough? How do we get started on the path to success?
Yeah, first of all, by just engaging a professional reserve study provider whose expertise is laying out unobjectively these expenses, we're kind of a shield for that courage. Yes, it takes courage, but that's why you go to your professionals, so that we can be your backstop and help you get there. One thing we've thought of over the years, we call the $10 solution. It likely took most associations years or even decades to get into an underfunded jam. So generally, it's going to take a few years to get out, but have them raise reserve contributions by $10 a month per owner this year, and then another $10 per month the following year. And then you'll see in just a few years, it's usually all it takes for most associations to start making adequate reserve contributions. Now, I want to mention it. I just want to mention it briefly because some people get all hung up on this. There are two different ways to calculate reserve contributions: straight line and cash flow methodologies. Both have their strengths and weaknesses, but the bottom line is that they both provide for exactly the same expenses. If you or someone you know is curious to dive into that in more detail, we address this in our webinar on funding plans. That's Reserve Studies 103, again on our website, reservestudy.com, or on YouTube.
At Association Reserves, we make the present less stressful and the future more secure. If you want to join us in this mission, please like this video and subscribe to our channel. Leave a comment down below and what you would like to see us address in a future video. Let's plan for your best future.